Hey, it's Wednesday night. You know what that means. We're back live on the big mountain, just in two different locations this week.
Beautiful timing, Steve. Beautiful timing. And I love the hat. USA. USA.
USA.
Got a big hockey victory in overtime today. Canada had a victory in overtime. And the Olympics are only about 3 days remaining. And then it's done for another 4 years if you like the winter.
And the women play for gold tomorrow, which is huge. I'm pretty sure they're playing Canada again, like always. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll whoop their butt again like we did earlier in the tournament.
Absolutely. Well, as you all can see, we're live, but we're in two different locations because JY's got a little bit of the sniffles, and I wanted to keep my good friend Steve healthy and not contaminate him. So, doing things a little differently. Welcome to the channel, everyone. Let's do a quick rundown. I know our good friend Steven was in the house first. He says hello to everyone. He says he may have be a little more active in the chat tonight because some of the Mac news that's going on. Of course, we've got JEH saying hello. We've got Moses saying hello. I see we have other people in, so say a little hello in the Dweller Cellar, and we'll get you up on the screen. But tonight we're going to do, Steve, you want to talk Big Ten transfer rankings? I think you have a couple items in terms of what is it? Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. A couple Big Ten players announced for the Hall of Fame. Yep.
And then I want to get your thoughts on the Sac State news that dropped on Monday. And we'll see what our dwellers have to say about it. So,
yeah.
Where do you want to start? You want to start with the Hall of Fame or with the transfer portals?
Yeah, let's go. Let's start Hall of Fame. We can talk about Drew Brees and Roger Craig in that order. So yeah, they're two just really important Big Ten players and NFL, and more importantly, NFL players. I mean, they were good Big Ten players, but this is the NFL Hall of Fame. So we'll start with Drew Brees, first ballot Hall of Famer. He's I think for me and probably everybody else, he's in that top 5 list of quarterbacks ever. And not only a great quarterback, but it appeared he was a great teammate, great member of the community. When he went to New Orleans, was traded out. He had a shoulder injury. Was traded to New Orleans. And Sean Payton bought in hard on him, and he delivered. He brought the community back by giving them something to root for, winning. Playing good football and winning, and then also was just out there and just instead of just being sitting in his mansion like some rich guy, he was out there in the community. Just an awesome guy. Definitely deserves to be a Hall of Fame player and first ballot. Career threw for 80,000 yards, had 571 touchdowns, won the Super Bowl in New Orleans, was just a great player his entire career. And there were times, maybe he wasn't the best, when you're playing behind Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, he may not never have been the best quarterback in the league, or maybe it was the year they won the Super Bowl, but definitely deserving. And I'll just say at his time in the Big Ten at Purdue, I identified him years ago when he was coming out of Purdue. He was a shorter guy, he was from Texas and was not highly recruited out of Texas. None of the Texas schools recruited him, but he goes to Purdue, played in a great offense for him, and was just, he would just kill Penn State every time we would play them. And he was just a dude. And I knew back then he was going to be real good. Goes to San Diego, plays okay there, has a pretty good time there, but injures his shoulder, goes to New Orleans, and was just great. So I'm just really happy for him. And Purdue, we had Indiana win the national champion this year. We have a Purdue quarterback going. So those smaller teams from Indiana having a pretty good year.
Yeah, absolutely. First ballot Hall of Famer in my book as well. Just a great football player, but from all things that I could see, an awesome human being. You got to set it all there, Steve, just for the community and a good family man and everything like that. I think it's great. Thinking back, I remember, and I know he had that injury, but I was really surprised that they gave up on him, in my opinion, as quickly as they did. Because I'm like, he's young, man. Like, and I get it with injuries, you never know, and all that. But I was really shocked when they kind of just gave up on him, and that made me a fan of his, more than what I would have been, because I'm like, I don't think they made the right choice there. And clearly, he's went on to have an incredible career, Super Bowl champ, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I always look back at that, and I've always thought about that. Like, that was just a weird trade for me. I don't know if you had similar thoughts.
Yeah, I did. If I remember correctly, I think that might have been when they brought in Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were trading one Hall of Fame quarterback for another. But I agree with you. I had already been rooting for him because when I saw him at Purdue, I thought he'd be great. And from what I remember, it was a really bad shoulder injury. It was like they didn't know if he was going to play again.
Yeah.
And, it was in the offseason. So they ended up drafting Rivers. And honestly, I think it worked out great, probably for everybody, because I think, him being in New Orleans and at the timing that he went there, I think was the perfect timing. And being united with Sean Payton, I mean, that guy is a quarterback guru. He gets the best out of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I was shocked at the time. I was kind of mad at the Chargers. Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
But it worked out perfectly for him. And there's a little known fact about Drew Brees that a lot of people don't know. I actually met him in person at the beach club at Walt Disney World in Orlando. He was staying at the same. My wife always teases me because I always tell people how I met Drew Brees, but we rode an elevator together at the beach club in Orlando. Real nice guy. I chatted him up a bit, and he could have just like looked at me and ignored me or whatever,
Yeah.
But real nice guy. We chatted. Told him I was a Penn State fan, and he's like, "Oh, I put some numbers on you guys back in the day." So, which he clearly did. So nice little chat with him. I got to meet him, and a great guy. What's funny is when he was on the field, he looked small. He looked tiny compared to, and I'm 6 foot, right around, and I think he was a good inch taller than me. So he didn't look so small in the elevator, and I'm sure he won't look too small when he puts on that Hall of Fame jacket either.
Absolutely not. You've told me that story about meeting him in Disney, or at a hotel of Disney's.
Yeah.
And that's where you meet people, because we met when I was a youngster. I met Dick Van Dyke, not football related at all, but Dick Van Dyke was there. We got to meet that guy. But anyway,
very cool.
All right, do you want to go to number 2 here?
Yeah, let's go to Roger Craig. He played for Nebraska, which they were not in the Big Ten at the time, but we're still claiming him. And then he went on to have a Hall of Fame career with the 49ers. And honestly, he was a big part of that West Coast offense, where they used the running back heavily out of the backfield as a receiver. And that was a huge part of the West Coast offense. And he really made that offense go. Everyone remembers, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and they were the first ballot Hall of Famers. I think Roger Craig made it in. I didn't look this up. I meant to, but what they call like the old timers vote, like basically the players, the older players that have played a long time, they in Hall of Famers, they get to vote on someone who maybe didn't make it in the first time, but is well deserved, and he is well deserved. He was a huge part again of that West Coast offense that won the 49ers, 4 Super Bowls, maybe 5 Super Bowls if you count the Steve Young era. Was a huge part of that, and was kind of groundbreaking. I kind of think of it as he was Marshall Faulk before Marshall Faulk. Now, I'm not going to say he was as talented, as dynamic as Marshall Faulk, because he was amazing, but he was that guy, out of the backfield that could do those things, and that's what allowed Jerry Rice to make all those great, touchdown catches and all that, because teams had to play defenses had to play them honest and cover him as well, and he was such a great playmaker when they needed to move the chains, to set up those great plays. So I'm glad to see the old timers committee, I'm pretty sure, brought him in, and he didn't have the numbers that some guys did. He had, let's see here, he didn't break 10,000 yards rushing. He had about 8,000 yards rushing, and then he added on, I think, let's see here, receiving, maybe a couple thousand yards receiving in his career. But he, again, was just a guy that made a great offense go, a team that won a bunch of Super Bowls. So I'm glad to see him in, and again, played for Nebraska. They weren't in the Big Ten, but we're claiming them.
Hey, you're allowed to. And yeah, I like seeing some of these guys. When I hear Craig as a last name, especially since we're in Olympic season, I think of Jimmy Craig. Jim Craig, the goalie for the 80 team. But anyway, I go off on like complete left turn, so I apologize. But
we all got the Olympics on the brain, man. But for me, between hockey and curling, like I'm just in my glory right now.
For sure. I don't have any comments about him, but I appreciate you bringing that up. I do have a question though about Nebraska, and I didn't prep you for this, but I assume you saw the news about. There was a chance that Nebraska, or at least they were contemplating going back to the Big 12 in, when was that, 2018? I can't remember the date. 21? I don't know. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the AD, their previous AD had come out with a book, and he's, I think, maybe done an interview and some of that stuff. I could see the AD wanting to do it at the time, I think, and that was before Texas and Oklahoma had left the Big 12. I think it would have been a huge mistake for many reasons, but I can understand why an athletic director would want to do that. Okay. I have a feeling that the president of the university and their board of directors would not have allowed it. I think it was more of an AD thing, and he was thinking about, football and more like the immediate kind of boots on the ground stuff of competing in the Big Ten and their natural recruiting base and all that. I don't think it would have happened again because I think some higher, that we always talk about the decision makers, the president of the university, all that, I think would have stopped it for many reasons. They had the AAU problem where they had AAU status, and then they lost it before they went to the Big Ten. But just because they lost that status didn't really hurt them right then, because they were still going to the Big Ten and joining the Big Ten's resource consortium, and all that, and sharing that. And really, they lost AAU status on a technicality. So I really think for on the field football success, it might have been better for them. And I'm sure that's why the AD was contemplating that. But at the same time, football programs make, tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of $1 million now. But that research money is billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I just don't think it would have happened. And if it did, I don't think it would have worked out great for them. So I think it worked out good for everybody.
I knew you'd have a thought on that. So
yeah, no, I appreciate the question, because I kind of had some thoughts. I didn't really know how to work that. I didn't know if we wanted to cover that as a full topic. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, well, Steven said he's, kind of shocked, surprised that it took Roger Craig this long to get into the Hall of Fame. JEH says you can't claim him because he wasn't in the Big Ten, but you're claiming it anyway.
Yeah, so, I can do anything I want. It's our show. We can do what we want.
And so let me go back up here. One other thing before I get to your Big Ten transfer rankings. There was some news hit today. I'm trying to think. Oh, Moses put it up here. Little nervous about the upcoming season. Timing is tough for a coaching change. So Coach Hammock, the news came out today that he's leaving NIU, going over to Seattle as some sort of an offensive something or others.
I think running backs coach.
Yeah, and so they're in the market for a new head coach. Definitely not great timing, but it was the end of his contract, so I'm sure the two sides knew this was coming for a little while. Two sides being NIU, AD Frazier, and Coach Hammock. Like this didn't just happen overnight. So I'm sure there's a plan in place. I think the question right now, JEH says it's kind of a tough hit. I think the question is what happens with players and transfers, because this triggers a new kind of window for players when a head coach leaves. So we'll know that soon enough. I think it opens 5 days from, I guess, today, and then they have 15 days to determine if they want to enter the transfer portal. I would just say to any NIU player, I would take a look at this year's transfer portal and the percentage of players that found a new home, and be very cautious about putting your name into the portal at this point. But that would just be me. I'm a cautious kind of guy.
Yeah, and honestly, players can put their name in the portal and then look around and
True.
find out that there's not anything better for them.
Right.
Um, right now a lot of teams, they have their rosters set. They brought in the guys that they want.
Yeah.
I think more importantly than that is that as they're entering Mountain West conference football play, that they identify the right guy, whether that's going to be making the interim guy is he going to be the long-term solution, or are they going to go out and find a replacement? Just I think to me that's the most important part. Find the right guy. Give yourself some time, because they're really hitting the reset button now, going to the Mountain West.
Sure.
And don't make a rash decision. Maybe just based on this season. Let's make the right decision for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the important part as they enter Mountain West play.
Yep. I agree with you. So, all right, Steve.
Just last thing I'll say there is I have total confidence in AD Frazier to make the right hire, make the right decision.
For sure. All right, Steve, I'm going to let you go off on your Big Ten transfer rankings. I'm going to leave the stage here for just a moment anyway, I'll be right back.
Okay.
But I'll let you go here.
All right. Well, yeah, so I think everybody can see the graphic up there. And I'm not just going to read through that list because it's boring. Anybody can read through the list, but there's just some names, some schools that pop out at me. Some things I want to talk about here. Now, this list is the rankings from 247 Sports. So this is their composite ranking, and they've changed how they've done the transfer rankings a little bit each year. And now I think they have it. I think this is the best methodology that they've used so far, which is they take into account both transfers coming in and transfers going out. And also before it was kind of based on where their rank was when they were recruited, the original rank, and they put more in here how they produced so far. So no surprise, two of the top 3 teams up here, Ohio State and Indiana. They're two of the top 3 teams in the conference, but also 2 of the top 10 teams in the nation. Ohio State, everybody wants to go to Ohio State. They're a juggernaut, even though they didn't win the championship this year. They're a recruiting machine. The success that people have gone in there with Julian Sand, Caleb Downs, they can get very talented players that can come in and know they can be plugged right in. There was the running back a couple of years ago from Ole Miss that came up. So talented players can go there and be plugged into that lineup and be surrounded by great players and have success. They've proven that. So it does, and they have, maybe not the best NIL budget in the country. There's some other people that have some big wallets that are backing up, but still a good NIL budget combined with the proven track record. So they're right up there. And Indiana, I don't know if Bill is on here tonight, but he was pointing out how Indiana was just reloading in the transfer portal, bringing in some top players. They brought in that wide receiver from Michigan State, who was, just a top 5 wide receiver in the country when he was recruited a couple years ago. So Indiana is just totally reloading. Michigan reloading. They got a new coach. They brought in some players from Utah. Now Penn State is up there at 6 in between Ohio State and Indiana. A lot of that is they brought in some good players from Iowa State and some other good players as well. But they really had to kind of rebuild their roster with James Franklin being fired and Matt Campbell coming in. So theirs is mostly volume and just, again, a ton of players, really good players from Iowa State. So it's nice to see them up there in the top because they needed to rebuild that roster for sure. And then, you got teams like Oregon, USC, UCLA. They have plenty of money. The one that really surprised me, Minnesota, ranked 34 in the nation. I mean, just being in the top 50, especially being in the top 35 in the country, I think is really good for them. I think they needed to bring in some more talent. They did lose one of their top players, their safety. So that was a big blow, but they brought in some other good players. So I was happy for them to see them at 34. And then on the other end of that, teams like Illinois and Iowa, they're not known as being a big transfer destination. They develop their own players, so it does not surprise me to see them down there, 58 and 64. And really didn't surprise me to see Rutgers in Maryland at 71 and 73. They're not top destinations. They don't have big NIL budgets. So those were not surprises. I wonder about teams like Northwestern, Wisconsin, Michigan State. Those are teams, especially, Michigan State and Northwestern, they need to rebuild. They need to replenish their talent. So I'm a little worried about them. And even Michigan State, with a newer coaching staff, they need to rebuild talent. So I worry about those teams. I don't worry about Illinois and Iowa. They have great staffs, great coaches that will develop their own talent. So those were kind of my thoughts here. There's some surprises, like Minnesota being up there in the top half. And Michigan State, Wisconsin, Northwestern being down low, and then it's just not a surprise with Rutgers and Maryland. It's got to be hard right now to get players to come there. So that's my thoughts on the Big Ten rankings. Did you catch any of that, JY?
I heard all of it.
Okay.
Even though you didn't see me the whole time, I heard everything. Yeah, and so the first thing, before we get any further, we got to give a shout out to our wonderful Dweller member here, Las Vegas Larry, with his weekly Happy Hump Day, fellas. We are officially over the hump of the week. So good to see Las Vegas Larry back with us again. But yeah, back to your Big Ten transfer rankings. Yeah, I mean, Maryland and Rutgers, that's just going to be like year over year, unless they can pull an Indiana. It just is what it is, I think, for the most part. And, I would just say, like, I look at Washington at, 47th? Maybe a little surprising for me, considering, they've been pretty good. How they were really good a couple years ago. And then, even this year, they were a good team. And I say, oh, look, they're down in the bottom half of the Big Ten. But you got to remember, that's 47th in the nation. Like, that's not awful. I would like it to be better for them, but 47th in the whole nation, not really, too horribly bad. I will say Purdue there with Coach Odom, former UNLV guy, sitting at 39th. I'd say that's pretty darn good for Purdue. Honestly, my biggest surprise is Penn State, just because of how high they are. I know they had a lot of transfers. Everybody knows about the coaching change, but the fact that they're sitting 6th for me is surprising, because it's got to be not just they're bringing in players, but they're bringing in high level players. So the fact that they're 6th here, honestly, is the biggest surprise of this whole board for me.
Well,
I don't follow them closely. I don't know exactly the talent they're bringing in, but to say they're, Ohio State's 5th, and as you mentioned, they just come. They don't have to
whoever they want.
They just come.
Yeah.
To have Penn State one behind them like that, that's just surprising to me.
With Penn State, that ranking is definitely influenced by volume. They brought a lot of players in, and he was able to basically bring the cream of the crop from Iowa State in, sure, which meant I think they had 2 tight ends that are like 2 of the best in the country. So they were easily, they lost some tight ends, some recruits, some younger guys, but they brought in 2 top performing tight ends and a lot of volume. I think Matt Campbell is doing a great job of replenishing that roster, which he had to do. So yeah, I agree with you there. And I do think it is influenced by the volume of players coming in. And good point on Purdue. I was remiss in not pointing out Purdue. I meant to point out Minnesota was one and Purdue was the other, both being in the top 40. And kind of with Minnesota, PJ Fleck, he just keeps throwing the boats. They're not contending, they're not competing for the top of the Big Ten, but they're keeping their head above water. And they lost a major, and I can't remember his name right now, but their safety, young guy, he was very talented. They lose him, but they brought in some other talent. And I agree with you, Purdue, Coach Odom. I think I can see a stark difference between when Coach Smith came in and was trying to rebuild Michigan State to Purdue and Coach Odom. I think you see progress there at Purdue, like steady progress. I think we're going to continue to see it, not stagnation like we saw at Michigan State previously under Coach Smith. And then Washington, I'll just say, I think they had a very young team last year, so I don't think they really needed to bring in too many players.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of why they're out there. The big question to me are Northwestern and Michigan State. This time, is Michigan State, how are they going to rebuild? And I'm forgetting his name, the prior Pat Fitzgerald. How is Pat Fitzgerald going to rebuild at Michigan State? Is this going to be another John Smith? He was at a unique school before at Northwestern, and we'll see how he does this time. So yeah, just some things that jumped out at me that I found interesting.
Well, JEH says the good thing is he doesn't have to hate on Michigan State anymore. So, we don't have to worry about that as you're making your picks next or this fall to upset JEH. I want to give a hello to Chad. He just dropped in to say hello. He loves the show. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming in and saying hello. Moses, do you see PJ Fleck sticking around or transferring to a different program? Has he hit the ceiling in Minnesota, Steve?
Well, I mean, Minnesota definitely has a ceiling unless they get some, big donor or something that wants to come in. They have some improvement to do as a program. They need to increase their revenue. There's some things they need to do. Has he hit the ceiling there? No, I think their ceiling was 2019. They upset Penn State that year. I think they may have either went to the Big Ten championship game or were very close. I believe they won 9 or 10 games. I think that was their ceiling, but I think he is very consistent in keeping them near their ceiling. So I can't see him getting fired or let go or pushed out or anything there. But maybe one year he has a real good season and a bigger program comes knocking, I could see him moving up. I definitely could, but it would take the right opportunity. But in the meantime, I think he's going to just be there and keep rowing that boat. And, there's worse teams, there's worse programs in the Big Ten. And until Minnesota can fix some of their other structural issues, I don't think they're going to be one of those programs that is going to fire a coach that can, continues to have winning seasons, makes bowl games. And, every year they have some upsets that they're beating teams that they shouldn't, or, giving top teams a real hard time. So I see him being there for a while.
All right, Bill is with us. He's listening along, but he's having some tail light issues on his trailer. Last week, it was a flat tire, if I remember correctly. The poor guy is having some equipment issues, but he's here with us, listening to us. So, Steve, let's get to our last item. My cough is starting to act up yet again, and I have to get your thoughts on this. So before we get to Sac State, I just want to remind everyone, I know everybody on right now is a dweller, and they know what's happening, but we had a Bob Thompson interview, our second one with him. We dropped that yesterday. Really good discussion on the Mountain West, on PAC media values. I asked him what I told him I was going to ask him months ago. I need you to tell us about a merger and having one entity on the western side. I don't want to say West Coast, but, western side of the country versus having these two entities. He did answer that. So if you want to hear what he has to say about one or two G6 conferences, Bob answers that question on that pod. And then today I was able to talk with Ross. He's with the Bison Report. Big show up there in North Dakota. And he's got, direct connections and everything. So it was good to talk to him. He said, we'll do a home and home. I had him on. He said he'll have me on at some point, probably after the schedule gets released, so we can kind of talk about how these matchups may work with the Bison. But man, they're all in. I love this NDSU stuff, Steve. It's phenomenal. They are so ready to go. We talked about the other schools, UTEP, super excited, super thirsty for this. We got all of that love and the Mountain West got all of that excitement here a while back. Then we had the NIU stuff kind of come, of course, GCU. And it's just, we're rolling into good times here in the Mountain West, it feels like.
Yeah, very exciting. If we're talking about North Dakota State with the Bison coming in, very, very exciting time. Your interview was a lot of fun. And this is something both you and I think have been looking forward to for a while. We try and stay neutral about the different schools. So really excited about them coming to the Mountain West. I have been open in the past. I was open to maybe also Sac State coming in. We talked about, it seemed like they were kind of a long shot to make it to into the Mountain West, but we were both pretty sure that Dr. Woods was very adamant that he was going to bring this program into FBS any way he could. So I don't think it was that surprising, maybe the timing, but it seemed like right after the NDSU stuff dropped, right away, then this buzz picked up about Sac State going to the MAC. And I mean, the numbers better than I do. I know they're paying a lot of money to get into FBS and to join the MAC. And they don't have a lot of guarantees. To me, they're betting on themselves. So I think that's exciting. I think seeing Sac State play a MAC schedule, I think is going to be really interesting. We'll see what their team is like moving forward. But the program, they're betting on themselves. They're taking a big giant leap without a lot of certainties. And I know some people may be critical of that, but for me, they're going for it. I applaud them for that, and I'm excited both about NDSU going to the Mountain West and Sac State going to the MAC.
Well, it's clear they would not accept no for an answer, and they were exhausting every avenue that they had, including trying to get FBS independent status. They got the Pac-12's attention through that Sac-12 committee. I've been reposting our discussion with Josh Wood. That was actually, Steve, it was funny. I went back to look at that so I could repost it again. That was late 2024. It does not seem to be a year and a half ago that we had that discussion, but it was a year and a half ago that we sat down and talked with Josh Wood about the Sac-12 committee, and really have been following Sac State this entire time. So it's been about 18 months that we've been following their quest for FBS status. And you said it exactly right. Dr. Wood was not going to be denied, and he wasn't denied. And I have confirmed that he will be joining us on a show here in the near future, trying to schedule that date right now. He told me, quote, anytime, which we all know a president of university, that's very kind of him to say, but he has other items that he has to deal with. So you and I are going to hopefully try to sit down with him early next week. I'm sure we're going to make it happen. And it may actually be both President Wood and AD Orr. Maybe a combo of the two, but we can get into a lot more of the details. But I get people's question. When you first look at it and you look at the map, and everybody knows who the MAC is. I mean, literally, it's in the conference name, the Mid-Atlantic Conference. You're like, wait a minute, how does that have to do with Sacramento, California? But as a football-only member, it's 4 trips for them over to a Central Time or Eastern Time school. I did find it interesting that they're going to be paying for the schools to travel to California. And yes, I mean, they're paying some big money, entrance money. It's a 5-year agreement. Again, I don't want to go through all the details. We talked about some of that on the pod, and we'll certainly get into that with Dr. Wood. He's the one that would be in the know more than anyone, quite frankly. But I said on X a couple times, and I'm not placing blame here, but as soon as the P4 did this, and I'm gonna just say it, as soon as the Big Ten did this, like, what did people think that the G6 weren't going to follow suit? Like, of course they're going to. Maybe not to the degree that the Power 4 schools can do it. I mean, this is football only. You see, NIU is football only, so they're doing it probably a little more realistically with the budgets they have to deal with. But the fact that when the Big Ten did this, for people to be like, well, it would never happen to the G6, I think that you're putting your head in the sand, right? The first one kind of was NIU, and that's just Central to Mountain, not as huge of a deal. This one's a little bit bigger, of course, because you're going, potentially Western to Eastern. But I think that bed was made, if you will, when the Big Ten went coast to coast. So I don't know why people can sit here and like kind of trash or blame Sacramento State or the MAC for doing this. Like, this is the world we live in now. Like, now, are we going to keep regional Olympic sports? Are you going to see more of the NIU model? Yeah. I mean, Sac State's now doing that. North Dakota State's now doing that. It's going to probably happen more before we're all said and done. But with the budgets that they have for all of their sports, with the revenue that they can bring in from exposure and everything else with football, they're forced kind of to do something. And I'll give Dr. Wood a lot of credit. He knew that. He knew that they had to do something, or they were going to be just Sacramento State in the 20th largest media market that's, an FCS football program. And I get people can judge that, one way or another, but he saw the writing on the wall and he jumped with both feet, and here's where they're at for a while. So to me, I say props to them. That's what I say.
When the Northern Illinois news hit, we had A.D. Frazier on not too long after that.
Yeah.
And I asked them straight out, are you guys a trendsetter? Like, this makes so much sense. Football program can travel. You keep your Olympic sports in a regional conference. And I mean, it just seemed so obvious at the time. And you're mentioning the Big Ten, and that's a very valid point. But with the Big Ten and in the P4 in general, when they go national, they've got all the money in the world. They can have all their programs play nationally. But with the G6, I think this makes a lot of sense. And I do think A.D. Frazier in Northern Illinois, they were the trendsetters. And, we'll see how it works out. I already think it's going to work out great for Northern Illinois. I think it's going to work out great for North Dakota State. And honestly, Sac State, there's every reason to think, if they can be competitive, which I think they can be competitive in the MAC, playing football. I think that this could very well work out great for them. This is their foot into the into the door kind of thing. And they need to finish pushing all the way into FBS. But I think this is a great opportunity for them. And I get it. People look at a map and they're like, "Oh, this is crazy" or whatever. It's not crazy for football. It makes sense. I mean, yeah, would they? And we can ask Dr. Wood this. Would you guys have rather gotten into the Mountain West? I think sure they would. And I think they probably can build a good out-of-conference schedule with some Mountain West teams if they're willing to work together. But for football, I think this makes – when your goal is – and they've stated their goal, they've not been shy about this. No. Their goal was to get into FBS in any way possible. They tried to do the independent route, and I think they could have put together a good schedule independent, but they weren't allowed to do that. The NCAA didn't allow them to do it. This is their way to get in, and they're going to be in. Now, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and we'll see how that it could be a total disaster or it could be great. And they could be basically, one of the next just real exciting G6 teams that's competing for championships and all that kind of stuff. So, people need to get over the geography. As we've talked before, they're for football, at least, there's no more real regional conferences, honestly. Big 12, they have UCF, West Virginia. The SEC is kind of still the only one that's somewhat regional, but when you go all the way from the East Coast to Texas, like they're still taking up about half the country, and they're the most, I would say, regional. So, we're kind of beyond that regional conferences for football, and I think NIU, we're the trendsetters, and I think we're going to see more smaller schools, G6 schools, FCS schools that want to come up. And I'm just going to throw out a name. I don't know if you wanted to talk about them tonight, but I'm excited for Tarleton State to see the next step for them. I could see, I think you tweeted out today on X that there were, 3 possible conferences that may be interested in them. Right. So I'd love to see them in the Mountain West. Everybody already knows that. You'd love to see in the Mountain West, but they have options. They have opportunities. And for me, they're probably the next shoe to drop. And I'm going to be really darn excited about that when it happens.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yes. I found out very recently that there's 3 we've known about 2. I mean, we've talked about that ad nauseum. But I found out now there's 3 conferences that are interested and talking or have talked with, not just interested, but have talked with Tarleton State about becoming a member of their FBS football program. I don't know how the details of full member, football only member, time frame. I don't have any of that, but I know there's 3 of the 6 G6 FBS conferences that are interested in this school. So it's coming, absolutely coming for them. And I just want to mention, Steve, that, I still want to always try to remind people that the Mountain Time Zone and the Pacific Time Zone schools have a dramatic disadvantage over Central and Eastern in terms of conference affiliation, number of programs, what they're already traveling. Like, a lot of people on the East Coast don't realize, and I don't mean you, Steve, you know this, but they don't understand, the Mountain West has been a football league for forever, from the beginning. Like, and so if you're an East Coast guy, when you can actually take some bus trips, or maybe a lot of bus trips, MAC is mostly bus trips. Yep. I mean, outside of now UMass and probably Buffalo, and of course Sac State, but they bus like everywhere. Like, that has never been the reality in the Mountain and the Pacific time zones. They're at a dramatic disadvantage in conference realignment. So, give all of the schools, and we're talking Sac State right now, but give them all a freaking break. It's a completely different environment than what anybody on the East Coast has to deal with conference realignment. I had to just bring that back up again.
Yeah, and I mean, that was brought up even at the when the Big Ten was adding schools, and that was brought up by some of those programs that were joining the Big Ten. Was they were already traveling like crazy, like to go from LA or Eugene, Oregon to Southern Arizona or wherever. Right. That was already a huge flight. So just going from there then to Minnesota or Lincoln, Nebraska or Michigan or whatever, it wasn't a big difference. Instead of a 2.5 flight, it was a 2.5-hour flight or whatever.
Yep.
So everybody in the West at every level has become used to traveling long distances. That's just life for them. And yeah, a lot of East Coast fans, a lot of East Coast media, either they don't know it, they don't fully understand it. Some people just don't care. They're, right. That's just the way it is. Like, okay, well, if you want to have football and you're out there, then you're just going to travel. And there is an East Coast bias, especially in the media. But there's, like you said, there's structural disadvantages for the two Western time zones as well. It's not just the bias of the media and the fans. They have structural differences or structural issues that they have to deal with that cost them more money and things like that.
Well, Stephen, our resident MAC expert, says he will give Sac State a chance in the MAC. Hope it works out, but I still have questions. We all have questions. I think that's very, very honest, Stephen. We're all going to have questions, and year one could be a struggle for them. They are moving from FCS to FBS. They have a new head coach. Do I expect them to come and run the MAC? No, I don't expect that at all. They're probably going to struggle in year one, but that doesn't mean it's a failure and they shouldn't have done this. So I would just tell everyone, and I'm not talking to Steve, I know he knows this, but reserve your opinions for a little while. This isn't, we can't judge this in 6 to 12 months, I guess would be my caution.
Yeah, and there was a point I was going to make, but it looks like Tyler, is it Tyler Nelson, basically asked the question, and I have some thoughts on it. I don't know if you want to put his. Yeah, you want to read that?
Got a question for you. Which conference do you consider to be the bottom feeder, the MAC or Conference USA?
So I don't want to look at it really. So I like the question, but there's part of it I don't like. I don't like the bottom feeder part. I understand. I would call it more entry level. For schools, FCS schools that are trying to get to the FBS, I think both of those conferences it's a great opportunity for them to get in. I would put the Mountain West maybe still like a half a step above them, but either conference, and you see both conferences. Conference USA for a few years now has been more of a national conference, and now the MAC with adding UMass and now Sac State. Unfortunately, either fortunately or unfortunately, you're not going to look at them as just a small regional like Great Lakes area conference anymore. I think that they're right there with Conference USA as being more. They're becoming more of a national conference. I think that's good for them in football. I don't necessarily want to see like women's golf traveling, from Ohio University to the West Coast or whatever. But I think it's good for both of them. I think it's good to have two conferences there that are more like an entry level. It's a way for schools to get up to the FBS. Everybody loves MACtion. The MAC is a ton of fun. They got really good, solid programs there, and I think. And Conference USA, they probably are more looked at as the bottom feeder, but I think both conferences bring some opportunities. And again, like I'm excited to see Conference or Sac State compete, see if they can compete in the MAC, see what that looks like over the next few years. But I definitely don't look at it as a bottom feeder situation as much as entry level.
I completely concur. Entry level, and they don't choose to be entry level. It all trickles down, right? As when the P4 takes some institutions up, then the top half of the G6, if you want to call it that, will pull some teams up or institutions up. And the MAC and Conference USA or whomever's like, well, you keep rating our conference. Like if I'm Conference USA, I'm freaking pissed right now because all we ever have to deal with is other conferences rating us because A, it's all flowing uphill, and B, nobody else wants to go FCS, or I should say nobody. Few other conferences want. We've seen other conferences do it, but it's not as consistent as what Conference USA has to do. So I agree with you, and I don't think Tyler probably meant it this way. But I do agree. Conference USA has been the more entry level conference, but I think the MAC is, if the MAC wants to survive, and I hate to say it that way, but if they want to continue to survive and have the number of members where they're not, hitting up against a threshold, they're going to have to do that too. So, and when you look at Tarleton State, whoever gets them, it doesn't matter to me it could be the Sundown, it could be the American, it could be Conference USA. I don't really care. Like there's just this stigma. Oh, you've now accepted an FCS school. It's not, they're actually ready. Like we've talked so much about North Dakota State. They've been ready for a decade. Well, maybe not ready for a decade, but they've been building for this for a decade. They've been ready for a long time. And just because they're FCS doesn't make them some second-class citizen. I mean, you look at all the sergeant ratings and all that kind of jazz. I mean, they're way beyond ready. So this whole stigma about FCS and all that kind of stuff, it's I don't know, gets a little old. But I will say, Steve, it is a little interesting, and it gets back to my other comment about West Coast versus East. There's a lot more choices in the East, right? Yes. Like CUSA has gobs of choices that they can pick from that are within their footprint right now. The Mountain West doesn't have that. The Pac doesn't have that. Like two very, very different situations. So it is what it is.
Absolutely. And I think that points to Steven has a comment down there about the MAC. I don't know if you want to throw it up. But Steven says the MAC has to change its geographic footprint. And that was exactly what you were saying to survive. And again, you made the great example, started with the Big Ten. Everybody in football is going to a more spread out towards a national footprint. And we've talked about with TV deals, having games in every time zone. All of that is important. And, so again, we'll see with Sac State. It's really interesting on both sides because this is kind of the MAC's attempt to go national. And it's Sac State's attempt to prove they can hack it in the FBS. So I think it's exciting. I just love football at every level. I love watching it. I love seeing the teams compete. Yeah. So for me, I think it's cool. I'm excited about it. And the people, they think they're so smart. They print these maps and they're like, look where this school is and look where that. No shit. We all learn geography in the 5th grade. We know where the states are, except for maybe me not knowing that Las Vegas was in the Pacific time zone. I know where the state is. Like people think they're cute and they're funny when they post these maps. Like nobody else knows where the states are.
Shout out to Bill. I know he's listening. Nevada is in the Pacific time zone, Steve. But anyway,
I know.
Sac State. Well, I want to get your thought on this. It's not a yes or a no or a right or a wrong, but JEH says Sac State will probably be able to move into the West or a Western Conference in 5 years. Do you feel like this is maybe a short term? We have to, like, for Sac State, they had to do it now. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see like maybe this works out and they're going to stay in the MAC, or are you kind of more like, well, this is what they had to do now to get FBS? They've done that. It was a win-win for both sides. But if and when the chance presents itself, Sac State's absolutely going to go to a Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably their intention. And I think to do that, they're going to have to prove over the next 5 years that they can compete at that level. But yes, I think that's their intention. I don't know if they'll be able to accomplish that. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's because, and I could definitely see them. They show they can compete at the FBS level. I could see, potentially a spot in the Mountain West opening up in 5 years or so. Or let's see what happens with the PAC. And the question is from JEH, like, does the PAC end up getting rated again at some point later? Do the Beavs and the Cougs, get rated from the PAC, and now they're kind of back to whatever that is. I think there's a big round of changes that are going to come in about 5 years. I think the timing of this, it gives them 5 years to show what they can do. And I think their intention is to go, probably to the Mountain West or to what a future PAC may look like, or do we see a Mountain West merger with the PAC in 4 or 5 years, especially if the PAC were to get poached or raided again, whatever. Yeah. I do think that is their intention. They got the next 5 years to show they can compete, and then if they can get into what a so-called better conference out west, I think they would love to do that.
Let me bounce through a couple other comments, and then we can close this out. Was that Jimin says New Mexico is getting stronger. Some news today that their state, I believe it was the House, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was this. I don't know, it was one of the two, passed some funding for both New Mexico and New Mexico State. I got in trouble because I only mentioned New Mexico. We're a Mountain West pod, Steve, but Lord knows the freaking Aggie fans jump all over me if I don't also say New Mexico State. But New Mexico and New Mexico State may be getting some state funding for facility upgrades. If that continues to go through, we shall see. What else we got here? We got some people having some fun in the chat. We love that. Okay, you asked that one. We've got Dwayne back in here from Southeastern Kentucky. Good to have you back in here, Dwayne. Appreciate that. Appreciate you joining us yet again. What's this say? Dwayne, what else have you all heard from the other conferences getting more schools into their conference? Well, we all know the Conference USA likes to have a few extras because they get rated a lot. So I think right now, let's start with the Mountain West. They're on another pause. I firmly believe they're going to add another member or two next year. So Dwayne Russellberg, Mountain West is not done adding members. Not for this year, 2020. They're done for right now. On another pause, they're going to add more. The PAC, they've been very clear. They want to add another football member. No idea who that football member is going to be, but they want to add another football member. American, I think, is pretty set. I mean, we're not really tied into the American, but I think they're set until, as Steve mentioned, this next round of realignment. So they're okay for right now. Sunbelt, same type of deal. MAC, I think they've stabilized themselves. They had brought in UMass. They lost NIU. They bring in Sac State. So I'm guessing the MAC's feeling pretty good right now for the next few years. I think if they can add one, Illinois State's been brought up a couple times, if they want to dip down into FCS again, maybe, and it fits within that geography, maybe Illinois State to the MAC might happen here in the next few years. And then again, Conference USA, they're always looking. So as I mentioned, Tarleton State will be moving up. They have multiple suitors. Everybody points to see Conference USA because that's, to me, of course, that's the most obvious choice. But I'm still very hopeful that the Mountain West and them can make it work. But wouldn't be surprised if it's Conference USA next year either. You have anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I honestly think we're going to see at the Power Four level, I think we're going to see some stability for the next few years until 29, 30, 31, which, as we all know, if there's stability at that level and they're not picking apart any other conferences, it helps the G6 conferences to have stability as well. So I think that's a good thing. I think everybody is just really focused on the CFP right now and getting all that settled, which we're not going to get into all that bugaboo. What's the word, hullabaloo or something? We're not getting into all that right now.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see stability for at least until like 2029 at the Power Four level, which I think is probably a good thing. We can get this worked out, and then but buckle up for 2030 time frame, and there's so many big money deals that will be needed to be renewed at that point that are up. So I really think we get like 4 seasons of pretty good stability. Mountain West may add a couple, you may see a couple things here or there, but at the highest levels, I think we'll see some stability, which will lend itself, that stability will kind of roll downhill as well. Yeah. But oh boy, once we get closer and closer to the next decade, buckle up.
You're welcome for answering the question. People are already saying Sac State is just going to leave after 5 years. That's one concerning thing to Stephen. Absolutely. Could totally happen. JEH understands that some people are geographically challenged. And Tyler believes the PAC needs to be looking at more schools in the central time zone. I'm sure Texas State would love to have a central time zone partner. I would not, there's been a lot of talk about certain schools. For whatever reason, UTSA is just the one that, it's, to me, Memphis is not going to happen. USF was never going to happen, in my opinion. Tulane's not going to happen. But if there maybe is, if there's one little twinge of like hope, it would be UTSA. But I have no sources telling me that. I've wiped so many other of the American schools off. Like, no, that's not happening. UTSA is the one that maybe they can pick off. But I think the issue for the PAC is they've already spent so much doing what they've done and giving Gonzaga a full share, which is great because they do have the top half of the basketball in that conference is really good. The bottom half, not so great. But the top half, you got Utah State, Gonzaga, Boise maybe bounces back, San Diego State. Yeah, your top 4 or 5 basketball teams, they're good. But they've paid for that. They've paid for Gonzaga to come in and be that good. So I don't know how much more they have to pay, like, to get another school. And I think we've seen that. Like, I'm not hating on them, but that's why they don't have another school right now, because they don't have the money to do it. They want somebody to come in at a discount rate. And the only school out there that I can see them getting at a discount rate is New Mexico State. So, and I just don't know if they're interested in New Mexico State, but if they're pretty daggone adamant that they need a 9th football member, I don't know. I don't want to turn this into a what if scenario for PAC, but JEH agrees UTSA or Rice would be nice. I hear that. I'm not sure they got the capital to do it.
I really think over the next few years, I think you'll see both. And this is just my, I guess, educated guess, but I think you'll see both West Coast conferences, so both the PAC and the Mountain West, make an effort to dip into Texas. Central time zone, like we talked, we've talked growing schools, growing population down there. There's money. There's money in Texas. There's oil and there's money, and cattle, apparently lots of cattle. But I think we're going to see both, and like you said, and it may take a while for both conferences to sort. They both have their new media deals. Get into those media deals, play for a couple years, sort out your finances, see what your revenue stream stabilize, and then I think both of them, in the next 18 months to 24 months, could really look at who can we target in the state of Texas that's going to give us growth opportunity and give us maybe new revenue right now. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you named all the possible schools. JH says Sam Houston. Man, I don't know. I don't know if I see it, but I guess we'll see. But there's a lot of opportunities in Texas. There really is. There's a lot of schools to target, to choose from, and I think both conferences will end up doing that.
Yep, agreed.
Now whether they get their targets or not, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. All right, buddy. Well, that is it. I'm going to have a Mountain West basketball update tomorrow, and then hopefully you and I will be talking with Dr. Wood. Hopefully on Monday night. We can get that out maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday next week. So.
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw out there some thoughts. We started kind of talking about Olympics. Go Team USA. Any American that's willing to wear the countries of the colors of our country and go represent our country, I have a great appreciation for, and I'm rooting for. I'd love to see us come out with 2 hockey golds out of this this tournament, out of this Olympics. The women, they're just absolutely dominating. One of the biggest juggernauts I've ever seen. They totally kicked the crap out of Canada earlier. I hope they can do it again, bring home the gold. We'll see. And the men are right up there. They're right with Canada and all the best teams. So I'd love to see them and all the Olympic athletes. That's my final words, is go Team USA.
Love it. With that, hey, thank you guys for tuning in again to a live show. We'll be back hopefully together again next week. Smash that like button on the way out, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.